Okay, here's a tough one. Friends of the channel asking me to review their movies. Always dangerous, but yet another challenger has entered the arena. Jason Rudy. Host of the Franco Observer, a podcast all about, you guessed it, Jess Franco. Obviously, this makes him, it makes Jason a trusted individual, a friend of the family, a fellow cult member, etc. As of recording this review, he's uploaded 124 episodes of his podcast, and Mother Trucker's still fucking on, y'all. Enter his 2022 film, Lady Hyde, a pretty straightforward, no-budget riff on Franco's super good, hella rad 1971 film, She Killed in Ecstasy. Easily the best of his features with Soledad Miranda, in my opinion. So right off the bat, pretty high bar to clear. Hell, even Franco himself sometimes failed when ripping off his own material. Just try and endure white-skinned black thighs after watching Sinner, The Secret Diary of a Nymphomaniac. Ugh. Admittedly, that was during his house arrest period with producer Erwin C. Dietrich, and showed a serious lack of interest from Franco, who came in when Dietrich didn't want to take on the director's chair himself, thereby... Oh god, I'm in the weeds again. Rudy himself co-stars as Dr. Graham, who has developed a potential vaccine for COVID-19, only to be shunned by his colleagues over the use of fetal tissue. As a result of the mental abuse he suffers, Graham kills himself, forcing his beautiful wife Jane, played by the pretty magnetic Liz Clare, to take righteous, psychotic vengeance on those responsible. So, straight up from the top, we have the She Killed in Ecstasy plot, but with COVID in place of, whatever the fuck hubby was trying to cure in that film. Straight up, I'm not sure... I'm not going to mark the ripoff element as an issue for two reasons. One, Franco's filmography consists of over 150 movies and like 5 plots. 6 if you count Lulu's talking ass. It is very much in keeping with Franco himself to rip off the plots borderline verbatim. And 2, I'm working on a script right now that also rips off She Killed in Ecstasy, and I don't want to be called a hypocrite in a year or two. I'm vain. Speaking of which, if you want to see more about my writing process, you can join the Patreon, linked below. Yay! Capitalism. The Franco trope meter, by the by, is quite well fed in Lady Hyde. There's bad dubbing.
Do you recognize me?
Zooms out the wazoo, shooting through shit. Waves! Tits, jazz, female empowerment, shooting through mirrors, focus issues, trippy editing, Elephant Man references?
I'm not an animal.
Amateurish gore effects, hotels, gauche wallpaper, lesbians, perverts, stripteases, nylons. One complaint, I find myself contending with this a lot, if you're doing a throwback film, and especially if you're doing a throwback to this type of film, don't include fucking drone shots. I don't know if the shots here are stock or not, but either way, bad. Bad Jason. Bad Jason. Bad. Stop. I will rub your nose in it. You know what drone shots look like? Fucking drone shots. You know what Franco would have done? Set up in the middle of the street and zoomed at the building from ground level like a fucking boss. Or conversely, gotten a room across from the building he was photographing, gone out on the porch and zoomed at that fucker. Sorry, I'm very serious about drone shots. Oh, and hey, where are all the limp dick shots? Huh? A lot of fucking. No limp dick shots. I want to see that limp dick getting smushed against that vagina. Or belly button. Coward.
What do you mean?
I do wish the film had just a smidge fewer shots of Jane walking around in her purple cape. Very little of the cinematography here is particularly beautiful. There are nice shots, but they're hampered by what feels like a lack of foresight, low-rent handheld camera work, and a serious lack of color correction. That's not to say there isn't any color correction, I'm not 100% sure about that, but it doesn't look like a lot of work was done in that realm. I'm out of breath, fuck. Woo! While filmmakers like Franco and Jean Rollin can get away with these long, meandering sequences thanks, frankly, to shooting on film and having photographers' eyes, I don't get that here, and so these transitional scenes, they feel a bit more like filler than the filler they're paying tribute to, if that makes any sense. This happens a lot with filmmakers paying homage to those Euro titans, and to Jason's credit, he is far from the worst offender in that category. Hell, he's far from the worst offender that I'll be talking about in these reviews. Oh, I'm also not a fan of the faux scratched film thing. It can be done well, but 9 times out of 10, it's distractingly fake, so stop. That's not a huge issue across the board with this film, but it does happen, especially at the beginning and a few other places. But it's enough that I took notice of it. You really, if you're gonna do fake film grain, or if you're gonna do a fake film look, add film grain. Use like Film Convert, maybe. That's what I use, and it's very good. It looks like the real thing. And try to find, I don't know, more realistic looking film scratch stock, basically. There's plenty of places you can find this. If I remember correctly, Motion Array has really good film scratches and what have you available. They're not all great. You do have to kind of pick and choose, but you know, there are options out there that are pretty cheap. And I feel like in this case the options used were too cheap. So I would work on that. But anyway, once the killing starts, did that guy just come out of his mouth? Huh. Once the killing starts, Lady Hyde maintains a pretty high-ish entertainment quotient, and at a perhaps not lean pace, but a skinny fat pace. The sucker's only 78 minutes long, something most films should aim for, by the way.
That might not be corporate compliant.
The acting from the supporting cast is, it's fairly dire. I would have dubbed them personally with better actors, but you know, whatever.
Stop these experiments and stop practicing medicine.
But for a no-budget Franco riff, I'd say it's worthwhile and, you know, not a bad way to spend a little over an hour of your time. You know, it's, again, I try to be very honest in these reviews, and so as much as, on the one hand, I do like talking about my friends' movies, but on the other hand, it's a little awkward to talk about the negative sometimes, so I'm hoping Jason doesn't mind my criticisms. I just think that there are some big criticisms to be had. But that said, I think that there's enough going on underneath all of that. It's enough that I am very interested in seeing his next film, which did just have its premiere, or it's about to just have its premiere. I don't know when this is going up, but he has finished another film. I'm very curious to see what that looks like, because I think that this is a good start. This isn't his first film, but as far as what I've seen, it's a good start, and I'm curious to see where he goes from here. One last criticism, though. Something I learned myself with my first film was that when you're doing a fairly direct approximation of another director's work, it's not a bad idea to take large narrative or stylistic tangents away from the source. What I mean is there's a natural issue that comes with being a direct ripoff. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Again, I think that being a ripoff is totally fine. But that natural issue is the audience realizing that they could just as easily go watch the real thing instead of your film. So rather than a direct riff, maybe add a little bit more of your personal flavor to give people something extra. When it comes to Franco, the viewer has seemingly dozens of options for any given plot. And thusly, I can certainly see people putting on Lady Hyde, deciding it's an inferior reproduction in another film, and fucking off to go watch that instead. Being a ripoff isn't an issue, again, but the methodology and approximation of the ripoff is another thing entirely. You can't just coast on what came before, or else you're setting yourself up for failure. In a way, there are elements of trying something new here. A sequence involving wrestling, for example, feels distinctly removed from the Franco influence while also playing into some tropes in a more cynical light than the rest of Lady Hyde. I wasn't a huge fan of it. You know, it's no getting smothered by, you know, transparent inflatable furniture, but it's a cute, albeit overlong diversion. If you enjoy those wave productions, like shot on video films, the ones that are put out by... Who are you put out by? Whoa, boy. Brain. Saturn's Core. The ones put out by Saturn's Core. Then this scene is for you, little buddy. It does... I think it probably fulfills one or two fetishes for various people. Maybe Jason included. That's no judgment. Like what you like. In the end, this one didn't really work for me as a whole, but the dedication to the bit was appreciated. I am a big fan of being dedicated to a bit. I felt like Rudy was very close, and given a little introspection, some well-utilized dollar bucks, and listening to, you know, let's call it constructive criticism, he could very well hit the mark in the future. If all you want is to watch a hot naked chick do sexy and violent stuff, this one is an easy recommendation. I could have used more of both, but there is enough for most audience members, I think. If you want a low-rent homage to Uncle Jess, you could do much worse. But if you want something that takes our beloved Spanish Sleaze Crusader and attempts to do something a little different, I don't know. You know, there's the COVID thing, so that's different, I guess. But there's just not much on that latter front other than the COVID thing, which to me is a bit of a cheap way of updating the story. Still, I appreciate that we're starting to see a whole Franco ripoff canon to accompany his vast body of work. I think that's really rad and really in keeping with the spirit of Uncle Jess. So, you know, zoom and go watch a movie. What am I doing?
Justice has been served.